Hey there, I'm Bob from Oregon's Constant Gardener. This is Green Room Live. They always say he needs no introduction, and they introduce him, but I'm not gonna. Dr. Robert Faust.
Hey.
Good morning.
Welcome, doctor.
All right. Yeah. So,
Thank you.
this is kind of a new one for me, but I like it.
Okay.
I'm good with it.
Did you get my winning number there,
Farmers.
What's your name again?
Robert Faust.
No.
Robert Faust. Okay.
Did you get one?
I did.
Oh, wait.
Here, have one of my
Your card.
my famous grinder card.
Famous grinder card. Okay.
Thank you.
Good.
That's Dr. Faust's grinder card. So
That's awesome.
I'll give out one
Interesting.
every once in a while later on. And then you can remember me, you'll never forget me, you'll never throw away the grinder card, the bio grinder card. Anyway, but what I'm going to talk about is just basically the subject of humic substances, because there's a lot of confusion in that arena, and there's a lot of new developments. For instance, it's only been in the last couple months or so that we were even allowed to register our product in Oregon for what it really is. So we back when I started here, they just wouldn't let us call it fulvic acid. They allowed us to call it humic acid. It is one of the humic acids, because humic acids consist of a range of organic acids based on molecular weight. So the darker it is, the heavier, the higher molecular weight. And then down to the low molecular weight, which is the fulvic fraction. Okay. And that's the only fraction that's actually actively absorbed by cells or cell walls. Although in the soil, the humic acid will degrade microbially and release fulvic acid. But for hydroponics or anything foliar, where you want rapid results, it's got to be taken in either by the roots or the leaves, in other words, the cells. As of course, it's been said for years that humic substances increase cell wall permeability, and that's how they work. Well, there's way more to it than that. But anyway, in the last couple months, we managed to register our product for fulvic acid. Now, they require you to call it hydrophobic fulvic acid. Okay.
Why?
Because of the test method. In other words, their whole excuse to begin with was we don't have an acceptable test method that's universal that we can use to test fulvic acid. That was their excuse. See? So then an organization called AFCO, which is the American Fertilizer and Feed State Officials Organization, our Humic Acid Trade Association was working with them for about 6 years to define fulvic acid and to accept a test method. So finally, AFCO did accept the test method and published the definition of fulvic humic acid and the test method. Okay, so then the state of Oregon, under great pressure from our organization, finally accepted the test method that AFCO defined. See, they're all a member of this AFCO, all these different state officials. Every state's got a different registration program. And AFCO is sort of maybe a unifying approach. But, so now we can register it as hydrophobic, okay? Now, so I'll go into that a little bit. What's hydrophobic fulvic acid? Okay, the way this stuff is tested is it's sent through a resin column, like what they use in dialysis, okay? So the non-fulvic, the non-bioactive part goes through this resin column. The fulvic acid is trapped by the resin. And then that's washed off, and then you weigh that. That's the percent hydrophobic fulvic acid. So the product can be like this. It can be 10 or 12% fulvic fraction, but it's only it's only about 0.6% to 1% hydrophobic fulvic acid. So the number sounds low, but that's actually the bioactive fraction is the hydrophobic fulvic acid.
So I'm naive. what does fulvic acid, when it absorbs into the plant doesn't absorb humic acid, it requires microbiological degradation to get it down to fulvic acid. So the fulvic acid gets absorbed. What does it do?
Okay, I'll get to that. That's another huge story. Okay, so now that we've established what we're doing here, so we have a label now. This isn't it. We're going to have it out soon. This is hydrophobic fulvic acid. So it's the first time anywhere in the United States we could claim fulvic acid. So unless you have that analysis on a product, you don't really know what you're getting, bottom line. So we hope that this is going to bring things into focus a little bit. Because we know from, as a fact, specific amounts of fulvic acid fill in the blanks. In other words, it's a missing link. Okay, you got hydroponics, that's salt fertilizers primarily, okay? But there has to be a biological link between the living plant root and the dead mineral, either in the soil or in hydroponics. And that happens to be humic substances. And the only difference between the earth and the moon is humic substances. If you don't have humic substances, then you're not going to have nutrient availability. And that means there's not going to be any plant growth. In other words, when people move west, they kept cutting down forests, plowing up ground, planting corn until the soil is no longer productive, keep moving west. And then they end up in the Willamette Valley, the garden of the world. Terrific results. Now the soil is degraded, acidic, compacted, and you just have to grow grass seed. Okay, so why? That's the degradation of organic matter, specifically humic substances. Without humic substances, phosphate can't be available. Things tie up together. It's a buffering effect. It has legacy compounds. What's a legacy compound? Okay, so all these trees and plants that grew for thousands of years absorb biochemicals. Then when they decompose, those biochemicals are deposited in the soil. So the next crop of trees or plants utilize them. Okay, so those particular compounds do things like turn on genetic switches that give you insect resistance, pest resistance, and plant growth regulator activity. So when you bulldoze, when you clear cut a forest and bulldoze it, those trees never come back the same because you're taking away the legacy compounds that produce plant growth and protect those plants. Okay, now the same thing goes with these products in an artificial medium. Okay, so I started my first experience with humic acid was in 1973, and that's the actual picture. Some guy, I saw an ad, this is before the internet, okay? This is when you had the Western Farmer Stockman magazine, and I was in Montana, and there's a little ad in there, and it said, soil softener supreme, clodbuster humate soil softener supreme. Well, I had a piece of land that I bought, Montana, as hard as a rock, had been overgrazed, unproductive, Kalispell, Flathead Valley. And that's where this was taken. And so I took soil from my overgrazed field, put it in pots, put a pinch of it's this insoluble ore in those days. It's just like dirt. And I didn't know what it was, but I was willing to give it a quick try, see what happened. And I put some on there, and there you go. That shit works. I don't know why. Maybe it's the trace elements in it, I don't know. But I know it worked, and that's what counts to me. Okay, so then I'm a consultant in those days to specialty crops. This is seed potatoes. So then we bought a truckload, and we put it out on 40 acres of potatoes. So this was the untreated here, and that's the treated. Treated, untreated. So big difference in height. It closes the rows. This doesn't close the rows. You know, so the growth was, holy shit, you know. And then on top of that, there was a lot of insect damage, leaf feeding on the untreated. The treated, hardly anything. Okay, so I'm a pest control advisor. I'm also an agronomist, but I started out as entomologist, biocontrol, pest management, and all that. So seeing that, I'm saying, this could save the world. This is the alternative to toxic technology. I mean, there's something happening here. I don't know what it is. But these trial potato plants are protected. And that was only 35% grade. And back in the day when we were using 250 pounds an acre because it's insoluble, the product we sell now called Ful-Humix is soluble. So it's a 10-to-1 ratio, so 25 pounds instead of 250 pounds of what we got nowadays. Okay, then we did it on alfalfa, 75, with and without, on second growth, with and without. So yeah, okay, it's doing something. What the hell is it doing? No, that was top dressing. Stuff's supposed to be insoluble. How did it work after the first cutting, after they irrigated? And how come we got that big response if it's not soluble? Fulvic acid. That's why, because that's the soluble part. So that's the most bioactive, and it has antiviral and pest effects. It's a low molecular weight, and like I said, it's a bridge between the living plant root and soil minerals. And it's a major limiting factor of any crop in any area of the world. In other words, civilizations have come and gone based on a lack of humic substances and silicic acid. Silicic acid is a soluble salt of silica. Okay, so we did work for Florida. I did work in Hawaii too. Decline of trees. Like, why are these oranges so sour and yielding poor? Okay, what about the MacNuts? What about the... Okay, so that's the kind of work I was doing. And so we found that the major limiting factors were humic substances and silicic acid, along with trace elements. Okay, that's the Soil Science Society of American Society of Agronomy. They're the people that pretty much, have pushed, were pushing back. But even they show effects on membranes, transported nutritional elements, enhanced protein synthesis, enhanced photosynthesis, plant hormone-like activity. That's official. That's the American Society of Agronomy. Okay, so if any academics in here want to argue with me, Bill? There it is. Okay, so what are the effects, indirect effects? Solubilization of microelements and some macroelements like calcium, potassium, phosphate. Reduction of active levels of toxic elements. Okay, so a lot of these soils have lead, mercury. They used to use mercury to treat wheat seed out here. That's why the river's full of mercury. Soil's full of mercury, okay? Cadmium, lead. It pretty much reduces the uptake of those toxic elements. As a matter of fact, we sell it to people for soil remediation, like at old mine sites and things like that. And then, of course, enhancement of microbial populations, soil structural improvement. Basically, as the organic matter goes away, the soil just runs together. It doesn't have like the colloid to coat the soil particles and keep them from sticking. It just tends to run together into kind of a clay matrix. And then it's time to go to town and get a job.
Yeah.
And USDA, okay. Actually, one of my buddies is in this now, Dr. Dan Olk, and he's working on these things, and they're getting really positive results in Ames, Iowa, with humic substances. As a matter of fact, he's the guy in the Humic Product Trade Association, now the main guy. So the USDA is kind of on our side now, at least that part of it. Of course, Trump has got them to withdraw all their research and not the others. So it doesn't matter because I'm here. So you have the plant growth regulate promoting activity on plants under conditions of adequate mineral nutrition consistently shows stimulative effect on plant biomass, enhancement of root growth, usually more apparent than stimulation of shoot growth, both increase in root length, development secondary root, enhanced curve, da 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 da. Okay, now what is important about this is what he says right here. Under conditions of adequate mineral nutrition. because humic substances do not replace fertilizers, but they do enhance the uptake and the solubilization in the soil. But, you need, like if you use our product in hydroponics, you need the whole picture, you need the whole package. It's not going to provide the nutrient salts. Okay, what do the Chinese say? Now this is something, not many people have ever seen this one. They're the leading in the use of purified water-soluble low molecular weight fulvic acid. I work with Chinese researchers, with the Chinese Academy of Agricultural Science, specifically the Drought and Frost remediation branch of the Chinese Academy of Science. Their big issue is drought and frost remediation using fulvic acid. But they did 7 years worth of research, and I got the book. I had to have it translated from Chinese. This is translation. But this is pretty much what their extensive research shows. Increases yields, prevent moisture evaporation, enhances development of root systems, increased chlorophyll density, activates enzymatic activities, enhances the effect of pesticides. And then here's their research papers here. It's like the table of contents. Fulvic acid, an effective and easy to use anti-drought agent. If I say that in Oregon, they'll probably pull my leg. So it's a drought agent, has a foliar spray to increase the anti-drought ability to yield of wheat. And then all these other effects, anti-drought, anti-drought, anti-drought. And then the more interesting part is, this is mostly, then they use it for anti-coldness agent and sweetening grapes because it increases sugars, disease prevention, cucumber mildew, other diseases, apple growth ring decrease, spotted falling leaves, could be like leaf spot. Probably the translation's a little bit weird. Anti-drought chemical and preserving seed moisture and soil water content. Needless to say, this is really important stuff if we're going to survive in this world. And then I work with the Russian scientist, Dr. Levinsky, and they have a little bit different take on it. But they're basically saying yield increase of all agricultural products, increase resistance to plants and industrial pollution, fruits enriched sugar, amino acids, vitamins, reducing need of fertilizer, reducing qualities of applied fertilizer. For instance, nitrogen you can reduce in 25%. And then improving soil structure and fertility. That's what the Russians say. So now we're up to several billion people saying all these things, okay, after many, many years of research. So this is what the Russians say, all the good things: increased membrane penetration, accumulation, assimilation, respiration, mineral formation, organo-mineral bridge, gel formation, culling the soil, connection of heavy metals, increased exchange capacity. Okay, what does it do to crops? Grain crops, this is yield increase over control. So this is buckwheat, this is corn, wheat. So this is the percent increase, 50%, 36%. Root crops, beets really respond. Citrus really responds. Anything with sugars really responds. Grapes, citrus, sugar beet. We use radish as an indicator. We use corn, there's cauliflower. Cauliflower cabbage really responds big time. It's funny that OSU hasn't done any of this. And then here's the increase in vitamins, beta-carotene, vitamin C, using humic substances, sugars, blah, blah, blah. Now, I'm working on a project now, because I'm working with a testing lab, to do a controlled testing to see what THC changes and what changes in the THC profile. Because we know it's there. We want to pin that down. So this is pretty much accepted properties. Chelate soil nutrients, improve nutrient uptake, phosphorus, sulfur, nitrogen, reduce need for nitrogen, remove toxins from both soils and animals. We have a human grade too. We sell a health product. stimulates soil biological activity and cellulose minerals. That's what it does. Now, how can one thing do all that? Because it's not one thing. The latest research with the latest equipment in organic chemistry shows that there's as many as 8,000 individual compounds within humic acid. 8,000. And they can only identify them in broad groups. So we kind of know what broad groups are responsible for increasing plant growth. Some of those groups are negative plant growth. So if you look at all the humic deposits in the United States, some of them are negative. They might have the same humic acid content, whatever that may be. That means nothing, because there's 8,000 individual compounds. So if you're not doing the plant testing, and if you don't know what you're doing, and I told Scott about a company that actually had negative results, one of the biggest companies, and they fired their researcher because they didn't like the results. So, and I didn't realize this myself, that the huge differences between deposits. But the thing of it is, it does all these things because it's a whole range of chemistry involved. You have antiviral agents, you have plant growth, things that stimulate plant growth. So really you have a whole bunch of things going on here, chelating substances. It's not one thing. Can't be. There's no one thing can do all that. Humic acid isn't one thing, fulvic acid is not one thing. Fulvic acid is a fraction of overall humic acids. And then within humic acid, there's at least 8,000 different compounds. And it varies considerably. Some of it's very negative to plant growth. So you got all this drought resistance, reduction. Okay, so this is the kind of test we do with cucumbers. So we have a control, we soak the seed, we put it in a pot, different rates, versus a control. So here's a full humic, this will be like this stuff, fulvic acid versus a control. So that way we can determine what we've got. Because the chemistry and the instrumental stuff and the analysis, we're not there yet. So we have to rely on actual plant growth. And what I'm looking for is root growth stimulation. See? So here we're doing different concentrations, figure out what concentration, because the stuff is homeopathic. More isn't better. See, there's a number there. There's a range, right? So we put this in the fulvic acid extract for 45 minutes. The seed. This is just soaking the seed, putting the seed in soil. This is not like adding it to the soil. Our bioassays are seed soak bioassays. Learned that from the Russians.
So what's the short one on the right?
Short one on the right?
In the middle, on the right side, yeah. What's that one?
Just variation. Probably when we dug it up, we probably busted off by the root.
They're all treated the same?
Yeah, it's a control, just water.
Okay.
That's all.
So you do make allowances for a seed, one seed difference to another, then you kind of go an average?
Well, you have to have enough numbers to make it statistically significant. Yeah. So we do like big trays, because, and you can use clones. Now this is what I love this. This woman came to me, and her name is Sandy Jefferson, and she works for one of the agencies in Salem, but she's from Grand Ronde. She's Native American, and she came to me about growing giant pumpkins, and I helped her over the years, and she became the president of the Giant Pumpkin Association. But, we started out, and now it's better than that now. We're like up to 1,800 pounds on pumpkins. Yeah, there you go. So how do you do that? Well, you need humic substances to do that. And then...
So, okay, well, while we're on that, now, I've delved into some of these big pumpkin things, and they'll pull a wick through the stem, right? And have it in something like this biomass or something. So they're
Well, they do that when they bring them in for weighing for the contest. They'll actually have it dipped into water so the thing doesn't dry out.
No, I'm talking about feeding them when they're growing, where they'll thread a piece of wick material through the stem that's going in and have it in a jar of some, I mean, these people.
Everybody's got their tricks.
Yeah, they all have their tricks.
I don't know, I don't do this, okay? You know,
Okay.
I do something else, okay? I can get into the
I
arcane.
was wondering if you could do that with cannabis, if.
Try it.
I'm gonna try it.
That goes bad, don't come in and tell us about it.
So
Yeah,
this is my favorite kind of, this is soil from my own farm down by Buena Vista near Hopville, where the hop industry started in Oregon, outside of Independence. One of the richest soils in the world, now some of the worst. Okay, so this is using our, what we now call full power, or full humic. And then this is what we call full power, or, yeah. Okay, so here's controls. And this is actually bird seed, you know, millet. You got millet, it's got some sunflower in there. But just small amounts of it on this clay soil. It's like the moribund silt loam, you know, it's like related to the woodburn series. Okay, so there you go. I mean, it's bringing it back from the dead, you might say. You know, they're at the point over there now, they only grow fescue grass seed. And this is millet. You can see the difference. Of course, we did work with millet in China, and our product increased the millet yield by about 68%. So millet's one of those responsive plants. It's related to corn and grass.
Is that a one-time application, or is that?
Yeah, one-time application.
Wow.
On a 3 by 6 foot bed, that's 2 by 6s high, how much would you use?
Well, bottom line, you're going to make a liquid solution and saturate the soil. You're going to, you start with a fairly dry soil, a gram per gallon
Gram per gallon?
of this.
Okay.
Or any of these, no, not that.
The TM7.
Or TM7
Yeah,
better.
Yeah.
Yeah, gram per gallon, and saturate the soil. That's what you do.
Of the TM7, is that what you're talking?
TM7 or what we call full power, which I
Okay, either one.
same one here.
Gallon.
This is the same as this one's the same as TM7, but it's got kelp,
Exactly.
soluble kelp. And there's a synergism between kelp and humic substances. So you get a lot of bang out of that one. And this one is got, TM7 has the missing trace elements that are missing from most soils. Iron, cobalt, molybdenum. We even add molybdenum and cobalt, which nobody does that. But nevertheless, plants and microbes need it. Boron, manganese, zinc, missing link. So that fills in the trace element missing link. But you can see here this is pretty much just fulvic and humic. You think farmers give a shit about this?
Yeah.
Some do, but they're like the black sheep. You know, they're the oddballs.
So, and they're probably not subsidized by the government.
No, they're not
to put that down,
subsidized,
so
they're grown
that's
organic,
probably
they're
why.
making good money. The rest of them are like. So, yeah, this is one I did. Matter of fact, OSU did this. I don't think much of them, but anyway. It shows you that this is fescue seed germination speed. So here's control, just water. Here's using the different humic substances to soak the seed. Because if it doesn't increase the speed of germination, you ain't got fulvic acid. Because that's one of the main properties of fulvic acid, increases seed germination. So you get like 2 or 3 days advanced germination. If it doesn't do that, you ain't got it. And if you don't have more root growth and more fibrous root growth, sorry, you should have bought our product.
So the seeds,
We're the only one with a label, so you won't know otherwise.
you're saying seeds are soaked before putting them in the ground, or are you putting seeds in the ground and then watering it?
Well, either way. These is soaked, and then they use it in the germination lab, so they're not necessarily even putting them in soil.
I see.
It's the seed lab at OSU where they're testing all this grass seed around here for germination and all these factors. for certified seed. So bottom line, that's the quick and dirty method of determining if you got anything. Because it's going to have to, Okay, so now we get into my work with the Germans. Okay, this gets heavy. Analyze the size, exclusion, chromatography coupled to electrospray ionization for your transform ion cyclotron resonance mass spectrometry. Man, that's a long German word.
It's a mass spec.
So this is new technology that we look at the components because we know, like I said, there's 8,000 compounds in humic substance. So we start looking at these new techniques, ion cyclotron resonance, which basically gives you the big groups of chemistry, molecular form, particular mass range. So we're looking for polycarboxylic acids and hydroxyl groups, and unless you're into organic chemistry, this is meaningless, okay? But there are specific functional groups, big, large divisions. Okay, you've heard of phenolic compounds. They are like the antioxidants in grape skin and colored vegetables and all that good stuff. That's phenolic. Phenolic, and then those compounds are toxic, are poisonous at a certain level, and beneficial at another level. What is it called? Hormesis. That's where a poison in a tiny amount is beneficial. In a higher amount, it's a poison. Okay, so you're talking about compounds that are toxic at a high level. I mean, way higher level than you're actually ever experienced. And then this is work where we took our product and we took everybody else's product and we soaked seeds and we measured root length and germination. Now you can see some of these products, actually here's 100%. So if these lines are under 100%, it means it reduced germination and root growth. So all these here are either at the control level or below. In other words, negative. And our product is up here along with, this is our product, is that, ion 14, fulvic acid 7. These are our products. So this one of these was a Chinese product, if I remember right. This one here. So that's what I'm saying. Just because it says humic acid, it can go the other way on you. Believe me, and that's the problem. And I've been telling people that every 20 years, people get excited of humic acid, they get some good results, and then other people get bad results, and then they start casting doubt on the whole concept, and people forget about it for another 20 years, and then they get excited. So I'm hoping this time around, we can pin this down. Like, why is that? The concept of fulvic acid is a wonderful concept. If you have the real thing, it works. If not, it's going to disappoint you, and then you're going to say, this is snake oil. And believe me, I've been going through this for years. So here we are. So now we can put the label on there. It's not hydrophilic, it's hydrophobic. Okay, that's a mistake. It's really hydrophobic. But we have a certified test method. That's the logo. If that certification isn't on the product, then you don't know what you got. Well, if that test method isn't used, you can't register it anyway. So, because that's the only accepted. It's actually hydrophobic. So I made a mistake, not hydrophilic.
Is California recognizing that logo yet?
No.
Any ETA on that?
Yeah.
They're considering it.
So does that mean you still have 2 to 5 labels around the country too?
Well, yeah, but we can sell this new label in Oregon, Washington, and a few other states. But right now, as far as I know, Oregon's the only state that's accepted it due to our lobbying efforts. And me going above some folks,
Every time I do that, I get shit on stop sale the next week.
Well, that could happen, believe me.
No, I know, it happens.
But bottom line is, this is the Humic Product Trade Association. They developed and paid for the test method. They pushed it through AFCO. They actually pushed it through Oregon Department of Ag too, our organization. It's putting pressure. And so that's the published test method. So unless you use this test method, it's an accredited test method, you don't really know what you got. And that's why we can only register it if we use that test method. It's the only thing they accept. Now that's going to change too. I mean, this is going to evolve, you know, as the science evolves. Now, Ful-Humix is the soluble powder. And it's got Humic and Fulvic and minerals and Humic and Fulvic, the whole range of organic, of what they call humic acids. There's a bunch of them, okay? And the humic acids are black or brown. The fulvic acid is gold. Fulvic means gold, it means brass in Latin. Fulvicus. So people say, well, how can they tell if it's fulvic acid? How can you tell an orange is an orange? It's going to be orange, okay? So fulvic acid is going to be brass, okay? But then we can separate a humic fulvic solution and break it down to humic and fulvic and analyze it. But so the Ful-Humix is something we use on the soil. It's what we use to improve that soil and get those results. So it's got the Fulvic for immediate stimulation of root growth and seedling growth, and then it's got the Humic that breaks down over time and stimulates fungal activity. And that's what you want. So you want a fungal-dominated soil, not a bacterial-dominated soil. That's when the soil goes downhill. It becomes bacterial dominant. The fungal mycelium go out through the whole soil, and they make a network, and they tend to cause crumb structure formation, but they do more than that. In other words, let's say a plant in one corner of a 40-acre field that's got good fungal activity, it gets a mite or a disease. Okay, it can send signals out through that mycelial mat to the rest of the plants in the whole goddamn field. And then they turn on a switch, bam, it gives them resistance. Yeah. Now, the fulvic acid has the components that affect cell, molecular genetics. Okay, so there's specific components in here that are one of the polyphenols, one of the tannins, and that particular tannin affects specific genes in a plant or a human, and it turns on resistance pathways, growth regulator pathways, and it does it at a minute amount. So what this stuff partially is doing, it's tripping genetic pathways. And then it has, instead of having to learn from the other plants, we just turned all that stuff on. See, all those resistance pathways. And then you got the one with the trace elements. You know, people say, well, they're trace elements, they're minor elements. We can do without them. No. No, you can't. Not if you want normal plant growth and resistance and formation of, alkaloids or amyloids. And then, of course, you have the TM7 with kelp added, and that does more things. Compost T activation. A lot of guys buy it for that because it really stimulates. And then the VAM is the mycorrhizal fungi, which is actually good in hydroponics, which I didn't believe initially. No, how can that be? It's not soil. Well, I found out I was wrong. Matter of fact, I didn't think the product would even sell. Wow, it's selling. But basically, mycorrhizal fungi are living fungi that are allelopathic, but they live in symbiosis with plant roots. They're not free living. So they'll attach themselves to the plant roots, and then they grow as the plant root grows. They feed off excess sugars, which we're producing by using humic substances. And then that stimulates the mycorrhizal fungi, and they release plant growth regulators, and they release phosphate in the root system. And increase absorption of water. Matter of fact, the mycorrhizal fungi have little pods that contain water, so that when you get a dry period, they're actually holding water for the plant. So crucial. You know, VAM is crucial. And then we have 7 different strains because they vary depending on soil type, temperatures. So you're going to get one of them that's going to work. Interradices is one of them. But the important thing about VAM is it was developed as, oh, I can say it here. It was developed as a biocontrol for plant root diseases. See, so we can't put that on a label because that makes it pesticide.
Yep.
But Amaranthus down here and OSU and all, the original work was as a biocontrol for root diseases. And nobody can say that. It's a secret. But that's what it does, as well as increasing plant growth and root growth. So it works in hydroponics, it works in soil. You can test your plants. You can have them tested, whether is it infested or not. Does it have already got mycorrhizal association or not? That's something you can verify. You know, there's 2 labs in Corvallis that do that. And then there's a professor down here at OSU that does it, you know, privately. Does the reading on the mycorrhizal assay. So you don't have to guess at that. But yeah, again, it's so cheap that you might as well just use it. And then the grass seed, yeah, there's with and without on grass seed. That's what we call the black sheep.
That's the black shirt right there.
Yeah. Yeah, you can see that. So here, funny thing, my neighbor never asked me. This is where my land is over here, and that's my neighbor's, and I was renting it out to them, my part of it. And I put the black sheep. And there it is. And you know, never asked me, like, what did you do out there? You know, never asked me. But there it is.
America.
And that's my factory. This is where we make the stuff. And actually, you can see the grass here. You can see my neighbors. But there's our factory, so. Yeah, and then, of course, the vegetable crops, of course. Good for gardens, too. Thanks for coming to my talk.
Fantastic.
So, any questions?
I read something about there being some relation between using fulvic and humic acids and kind of to facilitate ripening and finishing on a crop. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit towards that.
Okay. Well, okay. Now, what can hold back ripening in a crop or accelerate ripening? Zinc. So zinc deficiency is very, very common because they overuse phosphate. Phosphate causes a physiological disorder in the root to where zinc won't be translocated. So most farmers overdo it big time on phosphate, see? So you end up with a zinc deficiency, or it's just zinc deficient, period. And you can definitely increase ripening and overall maturity with zinc, with foliar application. So it's not necessarily humic substances, but it's zinc. Now, of course, this has got a large amount of zinc. It's registered for zinc. So you've got, here's a zinc source here. So it's 0.7% zinc, along with manganese, everything else. I mean, this is not something you use by itself. You want to use the whole package when you use trace elements. But take a look at zinc. You know, I'm sure I've looked at a lot of people's operations, and, you know, you can tell zinc deficiency. A lot of times the leaf is kind of scimitar shaped, or it just doesn't look right. Maybe it's pale, maybe it's not maturing. You know, okay, so I used to work with an old professor, T. Sen. He's the guy who did the first research with humic and kelp, professor at Clemson. But the way he would tell farmers, what does seaweed do? Sea kelp do? It makes the plant sexy. That's how I explain it to farmers. Turns on the female energy. Makes the flower sexy. Will be pollinated and puts all the energy into the, you know, the bud or the fruit or whatever. So that's what the cytokinins, which are like natural plant growth regulators in kelp, do. You can't say that because it makes it a pesticide. It's a plant growth regulator, that's a pesticide. Okay, but that's what you're doing. you're switching over to female energy. You know, like in Jamaica, I spent a lot of time in Jamaica with growers in Jamaica. You know, they feel about commercial fertilizer. It makes the plant mad. It makes it mad. What they're meaning, it just goes into vegetative growth. Makes it mad. Yeah, it wants to be a female, you know. It's mad. So I never heard that anywhere else in the world, but that's what they say. The other thing they say, what's the best stuff you got? We got goat shit, man.
Try that.
Goat shit. Goat shit.
Yeah.
It's a grade of pot. It's a grade of ganja. That's the highest grade. What do you got? I got goat shit. All right. Bring it on. Why is that?
So
Balance is why. Balance.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
trace metals in that.
Trace elements and phosphate. It's more balanced. Goat shit and sheep shit is more balanced than cow or pig. It's got like more even NPK and trace elements, and it's more humified and, you know, microbial. And so they recognize that as like the heavy hitter.
Like old.
Yeah.
That's great, thank you.
Any other questions?
We do a 12-hour soak with Zeus. Should I add a little full power in that to soften the shell and the seeds? We do like a 12-hour soak on our seeds.
Yeah, 12 hours. Yeah, each seed has a different soaking time.
We do it, yeah.
It really correlates with the seed germinating, you know. In other words, tomatoes 72 hours, cabbage 24 hours,
Marijuana.
24 hours. Because it's a quicker germinating seed than tomato. So overnight or 24 hours. But I don't know about adding other stuff. I'm not going to bite on any of that. Because I mean,
Zeus, I'm happy enough with Zeus.
because I don't know what Zeus
Well,
is.
Zeus is the humic and fulvic that you sell to us that we blend. So it's your humic, your fulvic.
We got it.
Zeus is
Good.
Yeah.
Well, probably just use that.
But for longer than 12 though, so it's your humic, well, you know humic is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and no water, just, we take your liquids, we put them in a
1 to
blend.
100. 1 to 100.
Yeah, so then for him, would it
So
be
it's
12
going to
hours or
look like
24?
iced tea color, not black. You dilute it enough that it's going to look like iced tea. And then probably no more than 24 hours. So 12 hours will work. 12 to 24 hours.
I had some 1972 Vietnam beans come through in 12 hours and everyone popped.
Big time. Big time. It gives a lot of strength to seed.
So let's say you have clones and you're trying to get root stimulation on the clones. Would you put fulvic acid in the water that's spraying up at the roots?
I certainly do. Absolutely. Some people say that's all you need. No, but if the plant has gone kind of into female mode, it's hard to get rooting to happen. So in that case, you have to use a hormone, a rooting hormone, along with fulvic acid. But if you get the cutting at the right time, just fulvic acid will do it. But if you force it into a different cycle, you know, like if you try to make cutting from a mature plant that's already gone into, you know, bud, that's going to take hormone to make that work.
Along that cloning line, if you were cloning in media, would you be dipping your cuttings into water with fulvic or putting it in the media?
You'd probably put it in the media or you'd water it.
Yeah,
water.
it's in your medium film where
You definitely water
crack
it.
your medium with it.
And you get an outrageous root system. I mean, most people who use our products know that. You get an outrageous root system. You know, because we started out, we couldn't say what it was, we couldn't see nothing, you know, and it just took off, you know, almost coast to coast. And it's just because people were paying attention, they were trying it, and word of mouth, I guess. It sure worked. I mean, I went all the way back to the Max Yield show in Boston, and I had people coming up to our booth from Maine, Rhode Island, all that. Oh, man, we use your stuff. It's really great. You know? Whoa, I mean, I didn't even know we were selling it there. You know? But anyway, it's just one of those visual things. I mean, where you, as a foliar in 3 days, you'll see a response. You know, usually the leaf blade is wider, the color's better, things like that. The root system is hairy, or we see fibrous, versus stringy. That's my criteria, like untreated, stringy root, treated, fibrous root. That's the physiology, morphology of the root. And if that doesn't happen, you don't have the right stuff.
So have you talked about armory yet?
No, that's last week.
You missed last week.
You blew it. It's online though.
Yeah, those are actually.
Those are just the winners from last week.
Do I get a hat for that?
No, I'll get you.
Is your full power safe to use around fish? Like,
Oh, yeah.
in aquaponics, it's a good deal?
All of it is.
Okay.
Matter of fact, we make
Stuff for human consumption.
what I call
right?
ion 14. It's like, it's a humic acid made with silicic acid. Guess what they do with that? They throw that in shrimp ponds in Ecuador. Stimulate fish production or shrimp production.
All right.
Yeah.
And the second question
It
is,
actually, we got people in the aquarium industry that use it for tropical fish that are black water fish. There's something about black water, humic substances, that protects fish from diseases and changes the sexual distribution of the fish to more. But that's research done by the same guy Steinberg who did all the other work with me, this German researcher. They get down to the nitty gritty. But no, it's beneficial to fish. But like anything, I say it's a poison.
Used properly, it'll
Right.
do good.
So you're talking about very small amounts. Like I say, to make a solution, what a lot of people did with the Ful-Humix or any of that stuff, measure out a gram, put it in a gallon, and then save a little bit in a jar. And then every time you mix it up, just compare color. You know, and you'll get the right amount. And that color is usually like iced tea. And then with this, there's no color, hardly any. So you just have to measure that 1 to 100, 1 to 200. 1 to 200 is effective, because we're making it stronger too. But fish, no. That's my big hope, my big dream, that the aquaculture industry accepts it. Again, it's just like any of this agricultural stuff. You got one guy or two guys that are getting great results, and nobody else is interested. We have that around here with blueberries and everything else, grapes, and you have a few people, but what happened to the rest of them? They're too conditioned, or they're getting all their information from chemical field men.
Yep.
Whereas you guys come in here, you get advice from people that know what the hell they're doing. So that's the difference between the agricultural side and this side. It's very different. Very different, because the attitude of farmers is, I'm not going to tell my neighbor. Because that's an edge I got, see? Whereas a lot of people in this deal will exchange information. That's what we're doing today. So it's just a different mentality.
I have a question for you. I remember reading some years ago about fulvic acid being applied foliar in like a late fruiting or flowering cycle and increasing terpene profiles or flavor.
Exactly.
And it seems like, obviously with all the other attributes from the root zone, that you've got all this increase of uptake of minerals and things that would contribute to that naturally from the root zone. But if you were to foliar spray, say is there
Yeah.
reports of that?
Oh, yeah,
Unofficial or
there's a lot of
official?
reports. In other words, in China, they sell it under the brand name #1 grape sweetening agent. It's one of their brands.
Right.
Because at the end, a grape production cycle, it'll increase the sugars. And not only that, the terpenes, or the flavoring components, bioflavonoids, phenols, all that stuff. So, yeah. I'm trying to pin down just what it does to cannabis exactly.
Right.
Because we think it'll pick up THC levels 3 or 4%. And then the profile is we'll see how that goes.
Right.
But I work with a testing lab in Independence now that can do that, so I'm gonna figure that out.
Okay, so if you do that fuller feeding, when are you gonna stop it before you, how much longer before you harvest are you gonna stop it? I mean, what's the breakdown on that stuff, do you know?
Well, I don't have any definite on that. I mean, I like to see the plants start to go deficient at that point, and bottom leaves can turn yellow. You know, you want it to start reducing uptake. But at the same time, you still want to have cell division, chlorophyll production, sugars, and all that. So yeah, I can't tell you exactly, but if it's me, I'm going to use it right up to the end, you know, as a foliar. Maybe up to the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Well, you said as a foliar? So that-
Yeah.
oh, okay, not in the soil.
Either way,
Okay.
but foliar control.
Yeah, more responsible there.
Now, how do you think that would
Fast.
do setting on late flowering cannabis? Change flavor or come up with test results? I know you haven't
Yeah.
quite done that testing part yet, but do you feel like if you were to use the full power for, as he was saying, foliar spraying and, you know, flower, like say to help for ripening, or like
Well-
you were talking?
Right, it's your.
There shouldn't be any flavor transfer with the full.
No,
power.
there's not going to be any
You
change
can drink it,
in
it's
flavor
just like
other than what
water.
the plant produces.
Right.
You know, and the plant is going to, that's a very subtle thing, you know, these flavonoids and the terpenes and all that, you know, and that's a hard one to pin down, but I mean, I can tell you anecdotally. Yeah.
I mean, if you have like 5 hours to spare for that day, you could really just be anal and block your buds and
Yeah.
flip up the bottom of your leaves and just hit each leaf
Right.
on your main tops all the way down.
Because,
I mean, it's one of those, it
Yeah.
depends on how much time you want to spend on something like that.
well, because what happens with humic substances, one of the simplest and most complicated things in humic substances is the proton acceptor, proton donor part. Okay, so what's that mean? Okay, it means that the whole energy of the plant is increased on the cellular level. So it can donate and accept proteins, and it's life force. Okay, we go into chi, orgone, or something like that. Okay, fulvic acid is a potent electrolyte. Okay, it's organic matter dissolved in water, soluble form organic. It absorbs orgone energy. Okay, that's a whole other lecture, but there's an energy to it in it that it impairs to a plant. It's beyond any of these other factors that I'm talking about. General chi, or energy. It's like when people drink this, they say, I haven't felt this good for years. I got more energy and I feel better. Why? Because all your cells feel better, you might say. Well, you feel better because your cells are now getting a complete package, I'd say. So it doesn't matter whether it's plants or people or worms. The testing we did in Germany at Humboldt University uses worms, uses nematodes to determine longevity enhancement. Now, screening products that increase longevity. Okay, our product does that. And they use a special nematode that has a specific life expectancy. It lives a certain number of days, that's it. So what happens when we use our product on that thing?
Get a couple more days out
Yeah.
of it.
So that's a quick way of screening.
Are you recommending jigger that every morning then? Is that
You want to live long.
Hey man, if you want.
Yeah, go to the
You don't wanna
website,
live
buy
long.
it in a different bottle and use it for human
Yeah, what's the
Already lived too
human
long as
use
it is.
label? What's the edible human use label, or what's it called out?
It's called Wu Jin San. That's 3 words in Chinese. Wu, black, gold medicine,
Uh-huh.
or golden medicine. That's the real word for it.
Is there any difference between that bottle and that bottle?
Yeah, the Wu Jin San, or black gold medicine, is highly filtered to take out bacterial bacteria, because this stuff is made with bacterial fermentation. There's nothing wrong with it.
Right.
No, doesn't hurt me.
But as a human supplement, they won't accept that. See, in other words, oh, where's your plate count? You know, oh shit.
I like
You know.
milk.
Right.
You can't
So-
drink raw milk, so you can't drink pure bacterial Fulvics.
Well, in their mind, yeah.
And you can't sell it that way.
In their mind.
So,
But, I mean,
juice.
cell's a cell, cell's a
Humic
cell.
acid, fulvic acid, right? So if you're using Zeus juice, is there a reason to use full power?
Absolutely. Because we don't foliar feed Zeus juice because it's more humic than fulvic. So if you want the fulvic to enhance, you foliar feed with, that's why we don't bottle full power, because it's already
out there.
Because we buy thousands and thousands of gallons of shuttles from them, and we don't make a fulvic. So,
But it's got full.
but we would still recommend is, you know, I foliar feed almost every day with full power.
I do too.
And then always drench with humic with my Zeus.
Yeah.
That's right.
Correct. If I use Zeus in any type of foliar, I don't use full power because it has them already in it.
True.
But generally, if I want to do that, I'll use like the side design with full power to make up my own. But
And it's just a good insurance policy as a foliar.
Yeah, for everything.
Yeah.
It's an amazing,
So the
it's in
question-
chaos, it's in a lot of products. too.
So the question I have is at what level is it medicinal and what level has become a poison?
Well,
You have
it takes huge amounts to really be a poison. Okay?
More than potatoes.
Nobody's gonna go that way.
I remember when
I've had people drink whole quarts.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that'll make your head spin.
You'll still be alive, though.
Yeah, you'll still be alive, because there's no known toxin
Yeah.
to come out. That doesn't mean it doesn't have long-term negative effects. But a lot of the reasons it had negative effects, not our product, is because a lot of those products have cadmium, lead, mercury. And so that's accumulative. So you don't know whether that's it or not. But the bottom line is, this is used for intractable cancer pain in China, even in an injectable form. So it has a narcotic effect, or it has a pain, an analgesic effect.
So you can analyze
In
those
high dose.
heavy metals and your full power does not have heavy metals.
Right. I mean, you might pick up something in a part per billion, you know, like 0.0001, just above the detection range of vehicle. We ship it to Europe, man. We can't sell it for livestock supplement in the US because USDA hasn't accepted it, FDA hasn't accepted it. It competes with growth, all that crap they sell for livestock. But the Dutch wanted to phase out antibiotics and growth hormones. So they worked with us for years on testing on livestock. So in the EU, no problem. We ship it to the EU, we have it analyzed for dioxins, for heavy metals and everything. It meets their criteria. And it's used in the livestock industry, pigs, dairy, and elite athletes in Holland. So unfortunately, US, we can't even say it's a feed additive. In Oregon, we can. In Oregon, it's a veterinary remedy. But this is the only state, see, that we can. Yeah, so you know.
Go bioag, because if it wasn't for bioag making that happen, Oregon would still be calling that a humic acid.